As I'm sure you have not heard a single time, it's a little expensive right now to live in San Francisco. Now, the housing situation in SF has become a source of constant conversation. What role does tech have to play in skyrocketing rents? What responsibilities do technology companies have to cities where they hire? And what can be done to help cities themselves retain their spirit, even in the face of change? In San Francisco, according to Pricenomics, the median cost of an apartment in the city has risen from $2,600 in 2011 to $3,900 in 2015. It's about a 50% change. According to Zumper, San Francisco is the most expensive rental market in the entire United States, even edging out the notoriously unaffordable New York City. In fact, 3 of the top 5 cities on Zumper's most expensive list are Bay Area locales. Now, why? Well, tech job growth tends to outstrip building housing. TechCrunch reported in 2014, just for one example, that a Bay Area city was discussing a new office development that would bring in around 40,000 jobs. Now, that same city only allows for 7,000 new homes by 2030. If you have even a rudimentary understanding of economics, you know what the result of that will be. To tell us how doomed we are in the SF rental market, we have Anthemos Georgiades right here in the studio.
Anthemos Georgiades is the CEO of Zumper, a San Francisco-based startup that works to help people list, find, and rent apartments. The company competes with the likes of Zillow, Trulia, and yes, Craigslist. Zumper launched on TechCrunch's Disrupt stage in 2012, where it was a finalist. It has raised $14.6 million to date. Georgiades has a degree from Harvard Business School as well as the University of Oxford.
Please welcome to the show, Anthemos Georgiades. Anth, my friend, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I'm confused, and you're going to help me. Only 8% of jobs in SF are tech-related, and yet the tech industry has managed to dramatically distort the supply and demand economics of the rental market. How is that possible on a mathematical basis?
So it's a good point, a lot of the tech jobs you see, there's people living here who are commuting down to the South Bays. I think we've all seen the kind of the Google and kind of Facebook buses issue. Yeah, I think you guys have covered that. It is a combination of that and the tech dollars that have flown in through the venture world. We did a regression analysis that proved that actually a third of rent price increases were based on venture dollars and how much had been raised in the Bay Area.
Was that a very popular opinion when you published that? I mean, do we guess no?
No, let's just say that of our investor pool of kind of 6 to 7 VCs, we had 2 emails pointing that out.
So the 8% number really isn't what we should focus on. It's the fact that people live here and work in Palo Alto, Sunnyvale, Redwood City. That's actually kind of terrifying because we can't change that very easily.
And I think the 8% number is true, and I think that when we publish kind of the San Francisco rent price, which is almost 3,700 median now, a lot of it's actually driven by the luxury ends where, you know, all these new things that have gone up in SoMa, and it's hiking it up in that 8 to 10% over-indexed towards the luxury end of the market.
But we're building so much right now. I mean, you go to SoMa, Pack Heights, Potrero, Dogpatch, even, you know, in Finite, people are building. So can we build fast enough to really change the dynamics of the market, or is that not going to be possible?
So the building thing, we work in SoMa, and it's deceptive. Like last year, I think 3,500 units came onto market, but there were 20,000 people that moved to San Francisco. So there is a huge imbalance. Even though walking around SoMa, you kind of feel like we're catching up.
Where do those people live? I mean, if we're not building fast enough and they're still living here, where do they end up?
So there's a huge kind of black market for apartments in the sublet world because not enough.
So we're just cramming bodies into the same space.
I mean, a bunch of the Zumper team who've kind of rented through us now live with roommates that they found kind of off market because they can't.
Have you considered giving them raises?
Yes,
I mean,
they will mention this. Yes.
So I'm curious, has there been a historical precedent or time in the past when we've seen this quick of a dramatic rise in rental property prices, or is this kind of its own standalone occurrence?
Never in the US has it been this.
Never in
the US.
You're certain about that?
Yeah, and there's one layer on top of that, that never has there been such an unprecedented drop in home ownership. We're adding 900,000 rental households to the rental stock every single year. Home ownership's now at 64%. That's the lowest it's been for 25 years.
Are these trends that are going in opposite tandem as we have more rental, but have less houses? And is that a bad thing?
The fact that like people are coming out of ownership and into rental. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It has gigantic impacts on supply constrained markets like San Francisco, where demand just escalates.
So thinking about SF as one example, there's also Austin, Portland, Seattle, even Chicago. They're seeing this kind of tech influence and driving prices. Is that going to spread to other locations where it currently doesn't matter? Or are we going to see this kind of in just about 8-10 pockets around the country?
Yeah, and I think there's 2 trends. One is tech, and you're right, that we've seen bigger spikes in tech markets, but there is this millennial aversion to ownership. They will own, it's just that they're not going to own in their 20s as often as they would. And so if you take Oakland as an example, which obviously there's been a few tech moves into Oakland.
Uber, for example, is moving in.
And what happened to Brooklyn 10 years ago where median rent started escalating. It's starting to happen to Oakland as well. So we do see this. It's in part tech, but it's actually a wider demographic change away from ownership.
Okay, now do you think large tech companies that go into a city like SF and hire a bunch of people, do they have kind of an ethical or moral requirement to invest in affordable housing for other people? Or is it just capitalism, do your thing, and rock on?
So I guess it depends where your kind of tipping point is. Say you took a unicorn. I think most of these companies would say they do things for fair housing and kind of.
Well, I mean, they could $1.5 million check and expect that to solve the entire problem. I mean, that's like 10 units tops.
Sure. I mean, I think the problem. So I agree. I think a lot of these companies will say they do a lot of work with the homeless, and I think it's an important part of any tech company, small or big.
Absolutely.
And it's something that we've done as well. But I think the wider question is with the mayor in San Francisco, and the 3,500 units a year just is nowhere near.
Nowhere near enough. I mean, it's kind of like a joke. I feel that number is just is minuscule.
It's minuscule, and it's not going to change because rent control, for or against it, we're not going to change it. We're not going to kick out like my neighbor who's lived in their apartment for 40 years.
I'm so jealous of what they pay. Like, can you imagine they're paying for like, ugh. All right, now, but before I do let you go, I am curious. This has been kind of a sad interview because there's not a lot of solutions, but is there any good news you see out there in the market right now that you can kind of bring to us to make us feel a little better?
So in San Francisco, I think Zumper's led the way in reporting the high rent rise. Actually, in the last 30 days, we've seen San Francisco has actually dipped month on month for the first time in about 18 months.
Is that on a year-over-year basis or just sequential month?
Month on month. It's still up year on year, but it's actually 1% down month on month. And actually the luxury end of the market has not only plateaued, but is dipping because I think there has been somewhat of a ceiling hit.
So I guess we'll conclude with, yay, we're less rich than we were last month.
Yeah, that's probably the best we can say for now.
Thanks for coming on.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bullish airs every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific, and you can find it here on TechCrunch.com.